China's new land border law and India concerns. It makes China's border sacred and inviolable. In India, some read it as Chinese attempt to stay put at current positions, others say it's Chinese action that count. On October 23, the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, China's ceremonial but top legislative body, passed a new land law for the protection and exploitation of the country's land border areas, which will come into effect from January 1, state media Xinhua reported. The law is not meant specifically for the border with India. However, the 3,488-kilometer boundary remains disputed, and some experts feel it could create further hurdles in the resolution of the 17-month-long military stand-up. Other thinks the law is just words. What has vexed ties is not domestic Chinese legislation, but their actions on the ground. The Chinese law, according to Xinhua, it states that the sovereignty and territorial integrity of China are sacred and inviolable, and asks the state to take measures to safeguard territorial integrity and land boundaries and guard against and combat any act that undermines. The state can take measures to strengthen the border defense, support economic and social development, as well as opening up in border areas, improve public services and infrastructure in such areas, encourage and support people's life and work there, and promote coordination between border defense and social economic development in border areas. In effect, this suggests a push to settle civilians in the border areas. However, the law also asks the state to follow the principles of equality, mutual trust, and friendly consultation, handle land border related affairs with neighboring countries through negotiations to properly resolve disputes and long standing border issues, Xinhua said. China's land borders. China shares its 22,457-kilometer land border with 14 countries, including India, the third longest after the borders with Mongolia and Russia. Unlike Indian border, however, China's border with these two countries are not disputed. The only other country with China has disputed land borders is Bhutan, 477 km, a signal to India. The announcement of a law that makes China's border sacred and inviolable at a time of prolonged ongoing discussion to resolve the standoff in eastern Ladakh signals that Beijing is likely to dig in its heels at the current positions, observers said. Lieutenant General D.S. Huda, who has commanded the Northern Command, which is responsible for the line of actual control in Ladakh, said the new law gives the responsibility of the border clearly to the PLA, as opposed to us with a lack of clarity on who among the ministries of Home and Defense is responsible for border management. There is a clear distinction, clear approach that PLA will do border management, Lieutenant General Huda said. With this new law, I don't see the PLA pulling back from any other area. Lieutenant General Huda said the PLA is now bound to protect the integrity sovereignty of the border, and saying that we are going to pull out from A, B, C, D areas will make this much more difficult, he said. Overall, it will make negotiations a little more difficult to pull out from balanced areas likely, Lieutenant General Huda said. Why should you want to pass a law in the midst of an ongoing standoff? You are clearly sending a message. Now that they have made a law, how does it reconcile with an agreement tomorrow? Going forward, the negotiations will become more difficult, Lieutenant General Huda said. They may depend more from us saying these are our laws. If you want to negotiate, this is our bottom line, he said. Or stating the obvious, some experts feel it is not what the law says, but what China does on the ground that matters. Gautam Bambale, who served as India's ambassador to China in 2017-18, has dealt with Beijing for much longer, said the law only states the obvious. Every country in the business of protecting its territorial integrity, that's the job of any government. The big question is what is your territory, and there we don't agree with each other. Mambale said the law has no implications for the question of settling the border dispute, which the two countries have been negotiating for several decades now. except to say that the central government of China is responsible for it, and that is true even without the law. It is only a whole amount of language, words, verbiage, whatever you want to call it. The real issue, Bambale said, what they are doing with the military, what they have done since May 2020, the way India has reacted. That is what impacts the ground situation. I don't see it as having any great impact on negotiations if there are any negotiations. According to Bambali, by their actions in eastern Ladakh last year, the Chinese are clearly indicating that they are tired of trying to resolve the boundary or the LSE through negotiations. They are indicating that they will do it through use of force. Model border villages. China has been building well of border defense villages across the LSE in all sectors. President Xi Jinping visited a village in Tibet near the border with Arunachal Pradesh in July this year. Even before the law was announced, Eastern Army Commander Lieutenant General Manoj Pandey, who is responsible for the 1,346 km LSE from Sikkim to Arunachal, has said that dual civil and military use of border villages is a concern for India. According to their own policy or strategy model, villages have come up near the border. In what quantity have people settled there? That's a different question. But for us, it is a matter of concern how they can make dual civil and military use of these facilities and villages. And we have taken note of it in our operational planning, Lieutenant General Pandey said last week. Lieutenant General Huda said China has always been using the civil population to reinforce their claims. He mentioned the situation in Demchok, where some so-called civilians have pitched tents on the Indian side of the LSE and the issue is yet to be resolved. China is trying to change the facts on the ground, not only through military but also civilian presence. Lieutenant General Huda said, which means you are going to see resettlement of civil population closer to the LSE. He added, if you, China, start having settled population on the other side creeping across what we, India, feel is our border at some stage later, when you start discussing the border between the two sides, they will say we have settled population in this area. Bambale, however, said China has been doing this anyway. Even without the new law, the law is not a necessary condition to be able to do that. In certain parts of Arunachal Pradesh, we know that. Perhaps in other areas also, he said. Thank you.